You're listening to the Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. The information contained in this podcast is based upon information available as of date of recording and will not be updated for any changes in law or regulation. Any information is not to be considered tax advice or legal advice and does not form an attorney-client relationship. Further, this podcast may be construed as attorney advertising. You should seek professional consultation for your individual tax and legal situation.
Welcome to another edition of Practical Tax with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. Steve, you and I were just talking about energy and about electric cars and about the state of California is in as we speak with the power grid being stretched to the max. So I thought it'd be an excellent time to bring in our first guest, Grant Norwood. Grant is CEO of Norwood Energy Corporation, which he'll tell us a little bit about that because that's down in Texas, and he's nice enough to join us here. He's also handles the day-to-day operations and evaluates oil and gas prospects and minerals. It's a lot.
Good old Texas with no state income taxes.
We love it.
I know. It's a bit different here in California with such high income taxes. And so many people in California are moving to your state.
That's true. I mean, if you moved over here, you'd probably have an easier job.
Probably would, but people everywhere need me.
That's true. That's true.
That's true. That's a racket that Congress set up, with taxes. When was the 16th Amendment? Well, with taxes. What year was that, Steve?
Taxes became effect in 1913, and I was not in law practice in 1913. I just want that to be clear. And when the income taxes came in, it came in as a tax on the wealthy. The top tax rate was 6%. And do you know how much income you had to be making in 1913 dollars to hit that top 6% bracket? $500,000. Wow. In 1913, do you know how much money $500,000 was in our dollars in 1913? That's how our income taxes start out. And that's what happens when the government starts off with just a little tax that'll only affect a few people. And look what it is today.
There was a panic of 1913 too. Wasn't that a run on banks? There was a difficult time, right?
There have been all kinds of challenges, but again, I'm focusing on the tax, and there's so many taxes that governments start off with. Oh, let's vote it in. It's not going to affect you. For example, politicians saying, oh, we're going to put this tax on corporations, but it won't affect you. Well, of course it will, because corporations say, okay, my costs are up. Therefore, I'll just charge more and consumers pay it. So that's why when people, think about a tax, they should think, well, wait a minute, this could really affect you. What's the government doing with the money? And that's one of the many reasons I became a tax attorney.
Speaking of which, taxes in the state of California on gas, this is your bailiwick, Grant, make it so much more expensive here to purchase fuel than it does in other states. Well, let's talk about where the price of crude and gas is right now for Americans. It seems to be going down since the last time we talked to you appreciably, especially in the last 6 weeks. Where are we headed, and how long will it take to get wherever that is?
Well, I mean, we have seen the prices fall back just a little bit. I would say that it's a little bit of this renewed COVID fear. I mean, we don't really talk about it over here much in the States, but if you kind of read the publications and some of where demand has a little bit of a retracement, it's all coming from Asia primarily. So you've got a little bit of that issue. There hasn't been any new, tension over in the Middle East. So what was driving it before was just the fairly new information about Ukraine and Russia. And then I think we're about to probably climb back up. So we've gotten over kind of these little, sensational events that drive it one way or the other. Now it's evident that we're still far behind on supply from where we need to be. So, we saw it climb just a little bit, looked like we were headed to 100. Today we're lower, but I think next week you're going to see it go right back up to, if not 100, somewhere in the high 90s.
And Chip, the part I look at is from the investor's point of view. Our Congress has given such tremendous benefits to oil and gas. Look about the exemption from alt-min taxes. Look at all the write-offs with intangibles. And the bottom line is Congress has so favored the oil and gas industry that for many people, it's just a tremendous investment. And besides the investment itself, all the tax benefits that go along with it.
Correct. And they're buying votes by trying to shame it, but they're supporting it, physically by supporting all the tax benefits because they know we need it. They know it's not going anywhere. But hey, it's kind of in vogue to talk about the green initiative and to, make it a little bit harder on the oil and gas companies. But the policies and the topics of conversation, they just conflict with each other.
Absolutely. And let's take a look here in California for a second, what we were talking about off air,
Yes.
where California says, okay, we want to have all these electric cars. And then they say, oh, by the way, but don't use your electricity. So
Right.
how is that going to work? And oil and gas is so vitally needed. And again, there's a lot of things that are not considered. For example, somebody says, well, look, if you have a commute, you can charge up your car while you're at work. And that's fine. But, a good thing about oil and gas is gas stations, filling stations are all over. What about that good parent who's very green conscious that drives the car to work and the car has to charge up for some hours? And then that parent gets a call from the school, oh, your kid was injured. We sent him off to the hospital. And the parent wants to go to the hospital with me, but wait a minute, the car's not charged up. And although, yes, the car could be out of gas, but if it is, that's 5 minutes in the filling station, not hours at some charging. So the bottom line is what Congress is really talking about is in the pocketbook having all these advantages tax-wise. So the bottom line is oil and gas is not only very, very much needed, but also is here to stay and a tremendous investment with all these tax incentives.
Well, aren't a lot of the oil and gas companies investing in the new technology? I remember reading, or Exxon. Some people may find it ironic, but they're really looking to try to get as green as possible because they know that there is something coming.
It's just like the tobacco companies investing in cannabis. You go ahead and you say, let's make a good investment. But basically, for all of our lifetimes, oil and gas is alive and well and a tremendous investment.
Right. Yeah. And just from our end, I mean, I've only got one private equity fund, but from like most of my PE backed associates, they're asked to at least have an ESG component somewhere in their portfolio.
What is
So
a component?
it's basically something green in the portfolio, just to make it easy. But so what they're doing is tiny investments into it just so they can check the box and get the t-shirt. But they know that's not where the money is. They know it's a loser from an investment standpoint, and it's virtually ineffective, if not more detrimental to the environment than actual oil and gas. But, just to kind of check the box, because, if you don't, there might be a mob outside of your building. They're just implementing what little bit they have to. So I think that the bigger companies are doing that as well. There's so many activist investors, and they've got such strong followings that it actually helps them just to appease a little bit, and kind of in a market like we're in where everything's falling except the energy sector. It's kind of like your only hedge if you don't want to just pull out of the market altogether.
What is the status of drilling and new exploration? Where does it stand right now?
I think that we're slowly going to start seeing a resurgence here in the United States. You're not really seeing it anywhere else, and it's lacked for so long that we're far behind. And I think maybe it turns a corner 3-4 years from now. But let's say they really get started 3 or 4 years from now. Corners have radiuses, and it takes a long time to make those turns. So, depending on what you subscribe to, $150, $200 oil, I personally think over the next 6 to 9 months, we might even see 70. But then I think it climbs right back because there's not really anything to tip the scales and, provide enough energy to where we have a low pricing environment again, or even normal pricing environment. It's just gone with the wind.
Steve, does investing in energy generally require a person to be an accredited investor?
Yes. Now, it also depends. There's some things that are riskier than others. Are you talking about royalties? Are you talking about operating? So, yes. But again, we're talking about investments. So this is something that's really good for accredited investors.
Well, what about like the technology that I would agree with both you guys that that we're not it's not cost effective yet. And your example with the electric car is true. Um, but at some point, just for geopolitics wise, it's probably smart to have other alternatives. Would you guys agree?
Right.
Well,
I
but
don't
what I
know
would say is this.
there.
Geopolitics is wonderful until you're in a cold, dark home with no food to heat up. And they say, well, wait a minute. Because, people, they talk about politics, but also you have to live. They vote their economics, they vote their wallets. And again, it's fine to say these things, and these are laudable goals, but we have to be practical. If you can't get from your home to your place of business, if you can't heat your food, if you can't take a hot shower, if you can't light your home, you say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then you say, well, wait a minute, what do we need to explore? So with
Right.
the green energy, that's fine and that's good, but I see it coming in a lot more slowly than, for example, the governor of the state of California wants it to come in. Yes, eventually it will come in. I mean, at some point, maybe somebody will invent something where there's a solar panel on a car and you just drive around. You don't have to charge anything. The sun just gives you unlimited energy forever, but that's not going to be in our lifetime or, the kids' lifetime or the grandkids, maybe the great grandkids. So right now we're talking about, say, the investors on the next, should we take a look at how many, 50, 100 years? We have to be practical for what we have now.
And
That
cars
one, yes.
cars are a lot cleaner than they were 50, 60 years ago, without a doubt.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, my diesel truck, I've got to put diesel emissions fluid in it about every 3 fill-ups. So, they're making leaps and strides. And I mean, I'm for all in energy. Keep improving. If we don't encourage this renewable thing, 100 years isn't long enough to figure it out. Hey, maybe something comes along in the next decade or so. It's just not here yet, so it can't be part of the plan per se. You
Well,
just can't have intermittent sources because what happens on the other side of that intermittency? So you're just left without.
And a workable plan is something that can slowly be eased in, and I can see people accepting it. When you try to shove something down somebody's throat too quickly, they'll say this doesn't work, and they could wind up abandoning it and actually hurting their cause. So I would say, if I was advising the governor, have a workable plan. But oil and gas in our lifetimes is so vitally important.
Steve, you always say this, and it's so true in this, is that the government system of taxing businesses can be used as a motivational tool to guide people toward, again, giving somebody a break on taxes in order for them to create more jobs. In this particular case, more energy, more options. One of the things I would love to see is improved battery technology, because that would help everyone. It would help, a non-renewable and help renewable as a way you could keep and store energy for a long period of time. And that goes to the heart of what we were talking about at the very beginning. Grant, so this is exciting. You and I are going to talk about some other stuff a little bit later on, and I'm looking forward to that as well. I really appreciate you being with us here. And
Yeah.
always, I love listening to you guys talk, because both you guys are passionate.
Yeah, no, we think a lot alike, goes a long way.
All right, well, you be well. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you
Hey.
soon.
Thanks so much.
All right, time now for our Ask a Tax Attorney. Steve, this has been in the news. The IRS went out and hired 87,000 agents. That sounds intimidating, and it sounds Orwellian, dystopian, whatever adjective you want to get. But how does that affect the average person? I know you always tell people, do the taxes, do them right. If you don't cheat, you never have to worry about anything. But how does 87,000 agents, is that a big number? And is it something the average taxpayer should worry about?
It's a huge number. Worrying about it isn't going to affect it. So I don't say worry about it. I say prepare for it. What's going to happen is audits are going to skyrocket. I know the government says, oh, it's not going to affect the middle class. It's only going to affect those big bad people. And you know what? That's why I made the reference earlier in the show how our income taxes started in 1913 as a tax on the wealthy. and it was only the top tax bracket was 6%, and you had to be making more than $500,000 in 1913 dollars, which in our dollars is an incredible amount of money. It was selected just for the select few. And look what it is today, where it comes down on everybody. These agents have to pay for themselves. The president says that he wants a big return on their salary. Well, how do you get the big return? It's auditing. And what happens is it's much easier for the government to enforce the tax laws that we have now than pass new ones. Because if you have a tax raise, which the government wants to do too, everybody's up in arms saying, no, not more taxes for me, put the taxes on somebody else. But the agents will be there to inspect, audit, do all kinds of things, and it's going to make a big difference. But the bottom line is, what I've always said is you take everything to which you're legally entitled, no more or no less. It's kind of like hiring more police officers. If you drive a car, you're more likely to be stopped, but so what? You show your driver's license, registration, insurance, and drive on your way. But that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot more to deal with.
All right, our next guest is Yoseph West. He's a co-founder and CEO of Relay. Now, Relay is a business banking platform that gives SMBs better visibility into their financials and simplifies the whole thing. And he's nice enough to join us here on Practical Tax. Yoseph, let's get you, there we go. Hey, good to have you here. Hi.
It's great to be here.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you both.
You know, I know Steve loves to talk about small businesses, and I'm a big believer that
That's the heart and soul of America.
Yeah, without a doubt.
They're very inspiring, right? They show up every day to make something new and to service their customers. I can't think of anything better.
And they care about their customers. You know, when I look at a giant corporation, and I know there's always exceptions, and I know that there's some individuals that are great, but I know the difference when I go into a giant store or I go into a mom and pop. If I go into a mom and pop really care to keep me as a customer coming back. The giant corporation, it's just, it's faceless, it's soulless, it's just a giant corporation. And a lot of times they want to crush mom and pop. And as a consumer, I just feel so much better taken care of with mom and pop than I do with the giant corporation. Mom and pop care, and I can't say that all the corporate employees do, with exceptions, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tell us, Yoseph, then, so what was the problem that small businesses were having that brought you and Relay and your group together to try to alleviate and or solve?
Yeah, I think small business owners face a host of challenges, and obviously the last couple of years have been exceptionally challenging for them. And the issue that we kind of saw like consistently, and like in my career, I've basically only worked with small business owners. That's who I've built software for over like 10 years. And the challenge that they always have is like access to financial information, basically. Sorry, did I lose you guys?
No,
Steve's
okay. Sorry.
I was listening.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So, it's just for the record. When I want to scratch my nose, I solo you so that nobody sees me scratch my nose. So but what you're saying is right. When people talk about small businesses, they talk about the problems they have, and financials have obviously got to be a huge one.
And Yosef, I couldn't agree more. The number one problems that small business have is money, is capital. Mm-hmm. And finally, the federal government has done something. One of the things that's helped out so many clients is a program called ERC, Employee Retention Credit. Mm-hmm. This is where the government is giving their grants. They're not loans. They're giving up to $26,000 for every qualified employee you have. So if you had 10 qualified employees, you could get up to over $250,000 and so on. And there's two different ways to qualify. And one of the things I'd like everybody to know is there's a lot of confusion here. Most everybody knows that a certain drop in gross revenue will qualify you, but so many advisors and a lot of CPAs, and I was a CPA before I was a tax attorney, so I know something about it. Tell the clients, no, if you didn't have the drop in gross revenue, but that's the easy test. It's mathematical. Here's a number. Are you above it or below it? Nothing to think about. But there's a second test, a facts and circumstances test, and there's all kinds of examples here. For example, here in California, for a long period of time, businesses could only use 25% of their capacity. And people are confused. Oh, but I was an essential business. So is your local grocery store. But remember, they were limited to 25% capacity too. Or you had supply chain problems, or your customers were closed because of COVID restrictions, or you had to change your hours. And I could go on and on and on and on. But the bottom line is there are so many people being told that they don't qualify because they didn't have a certain drop in gross revenue that do qualify. And in case somebody's watching this and saying, but my trusted advisor of years told me I didn't qualify. And who are you? You tell me maybe I do. I say, don't believe either of us. Go to the IRS website. It clearly states the two methods, and then it says either or. That is the message I want to get out, because this ERC has been the big difference between people continuing in business and prospering, or going out of business with a pile of bills they have no idea how they're going to pay.
It's interesting. Steve and I don't know, we've been talking to each other for 7-8 years. And I remember you were telling me one point with small businesses, payroll taxes were an issue that could get you into trouble if you didn't stay on top of that. But the other thing that's interesting, because you both, you're Steve, you're not a small business per se, because you have a lot of employees and a lot of revenue.
Started as a small business.
Right, started. So to me, the biggest fear, and this is kind of Yoseph, reading what you guys do, made me think the financials. So like you can be a service-oriented business, but then you decide to take on some capital, and then you try to track the money coming in from receivables as opposed to what you have to send out, and that can get so confusing and dangerously off the rails if you don't have a system in place. And how many people find themselves at that point? I know, Steve, you probably know a bunch, but Yoseph, is that a really common problem for businesses as they grow?
It's the core issue, right? Like most small business owners are relying effectively on their bank balance to determine how much inventory they can buy, right? And that doesn't include the money that's coming in, all the bills that are outstanding, the payroll that's coming up. They're like, I've got 100 grand in my bank account. I can spend 80 grand on this inventory or hire this person, and and that might actually not reflect their true financial picture.
And people forget about things like when you're in business, say, oh, I've got that 100 grand in the bank account and I can buy this and that, and they forget, well, wait a minute, did you consider your estimated taxes? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then it comes time to file the tax return, and the client finds himself like Napoleon, a little short.
Yeah,
and then they can make all kinds of mistakes, like not file the return. That's a criminal offense. And now with the new 87,000 IRS agents, they're going to be chasing people down. The government is threatening criminal prosecution for people. And the bottom line is all that could be avoided, but people don't realize it. And it's like, I don't know how to do their businesses, and they don't know how to do tax and accounting. So one of the things that we do for a client, and now with so many things online, we can have a client anywhere in the world, and with something as simple as QuickBooks Online, we can keep all of their books, and then we can say, look, of that 100 grand you have in the bank account, you can spend X any way you want, but Y, you have to put in another account for the tax people, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble, and you don't want the IRS agents going to your customers and saying, don't pay you, pay them. That'll put you out of business.
Yeah. Like just to add on that, one of the core use cases we see, we're a business banking platform. We're built to be like natively collaborative and to really give financial visibility to these small business owners. One of the things we see really smart business owners do is they create multiple bank accounts on Relay, and they have a tax account, a dedicated account where they're moving the funds across, and they can do it on a percentage basis.
That's like, exactly what I recommend to clients. And that's a variation of the old envelope systems. When is anybody?
My mom did that when she was raising 5 kids on her own. We had envelopes for food, if you wanted to go to the movies, you go look in that and there's nothing in it yet. Okay, you just keep hoping that it was a quarter when I was yay big, right? Oh, that's funny.
So we do that for clients too, and it's something that is so simple and so effective. But like everything else, you have to do it. You have to be disciplined to do it. And the minute you say, oh, well, I'll do it next time, that is the road to ruination.
Yoseph, with people that don't have a lot of business acumen, and I'm probably one of them, I was looking at your story and the names of the businesses you've worked for, Relay, HubDoc, Vuru, Zero, Wave, which now H&R Block. I'm looking at that, and we're like a 20-minute drive from Silicon Valley, but they have the same problems that IBM has. I mean, nothing really changes. When you have a turnover of technology, they still have the same problems. Steve, I'm sure half your people are kind of old school, and the other half embrace some of the new technology. Do you have?
We have people that are really, really, really technically savvy, and we also have the shoebox clients.
Yeah. Do you have, Yoseph? Is there? I mean, it seems now we're more international maybe than we were 30 years ago. Does the software and the process and the approach you guys have, does it have to change because it's a smaller world today than it was in 1975?
I feel like that's a big question, Shep. I think, from my side, like technology and like significant market shifts just take time, right? So like, let's take Zero as an example. Zero is the number one for cloud accounting outside of North America, right? Like they've built an amazing business out of, New Zealand, and they were at one point a $12 billion company. I think the markets have shifted. But, the narrative there is like they own Australia and New Zealand, and the market share that they have is like 10%, right? Wow. 10%.
That's a lot.
After 12 years though, right? And the cloud revolution is there. The shift to, modern technology is there. And so, people love to talk about these high growth Silicon Valley companies, and Relay would fit into that type of category in terms of the speed of growth. But ultimately, like it just takes time to make real change in the world. And so, there's so many small business owners that are adopting new technology, and it is not based on age. I can tell you some of our earliest customers were the age of my dad, and like, getting in there. And I didn't know until I got on the phone with them. Like I kind of assumed they were younger, to be honest.
Steve, do you remember when the technology first changed for you, when people stopped bringing in a big box and instead started sending you an email or bringing over a thumb drive?
Yes. And, here's one of the super benefits from technology. It frees up the business owner from doing humdrum chores that take a lot of time, that the automation, the technology can do it. And then he or she can run the business, and they can make more money that way and keep track of things. And what I'd also say about technology, there's been a big upswing because of COVID. Because what happened was all of a sudden, people were in their homes and they're not be able to walk into somebody's office. And all of a sudden, people were forced to use technology and learn it. And if they couldn't, that meant the end for them. So the bottom line is the COVID has greatly sped up, and you better keep pace, because if you don't, you're going to get trampled. And that's the way business is. It's competitive, and you have to do that. And if your competitor is using technology, they're going to be better with pricing and better with delivery and better with everything. And that can put you right out of business.
Let me ask you guys a question, both of you. When I was 16, I worked as a teller in the drive-through, and I'd take my guitar out there and I'd be playing and just having a good old time. And the banks, when I was a kid, didn't open till 10. They closed at 2. I went up to the bank. I changed banks. I moved a lot of funds from one bank to another. And I went there, and it was like, I felt I was at Chuck E. Cheese when I walked in the bank. It didn't have the same feel. Are we going to have banks in 10, 15 years? Either one of you guys, what do you think?
I think we'll definitely have banks. I think the question of like bank branches.
Yeah.
Like so we often, like one of the pieces of feedback we get from customers is like, hey, I just want to be able to like go to a branch and like talk to someone. And as though that's like a high level of quality, like customer service, which is, generally, I think we've all experienced it. Like I have a traditional bank in my life, and it's not necessarily a positive experience every time. Like they're perfectly good people working hard, but it's taking time out of my day. And I think one of the big shifts is how much can I do from my phone? And what can I replace the branch visit with? Can it be that I can actually call someone and they're going to be helpful and they're going to be able to see all my information? I'm not going to have to go department to department or work through a phone tree just to be able to get access to the right people for the right product and the right service. Would that be better? Right? And how much of kind of the branch kind of exists because people feel the need to like go there and stand there until the problem's solved. And customer service actually isn't, world class, which is what I think it should be for small.
And Chip, my prediction is the banks will remain, but it's like offices. After COVID, a lot of companies have offices, but they're much smaller because not everybody comes in. Not everybody comes in every day. So you still have an office, but it's much smaller. And that's what I would say, for example, with an awful lot of people, business people used to go to the bank every day, make a deposit, do all kinds of things. Well, now with people paying online, there's no reason to go in. And even if somebody gives you a paper check, you can take your phone and take a picture of it and deposit it. And, why walk over to the bank or drive over to the bank, stand in line, when you can do all that from the safety and security of your home or your business? So it's going to be just like the offices. Yes, you can still come in, but it's going to be more the exceptional visit to take care of something that's not routine. And that, just like an office, really needs a much smaller space than the old traditional one did.
Well, Yoseph, please come back. This was great. I love watching Steve. I can always tell Steve when it's something that, it's animated to him. This is because this is, I bet, Steve, if you haven't already, you have clients that you've never met, that's
a big difference in practice. In the old days, everybody came in the office, you shook hands, people handed you physical paper. Now, and especially since COVID just changed things so much. On the same day, we were all not allowed to meet anymore. So we all had to retire to our homes. And then, the IRS still exists. IRS even has plans for if there's a nuclear war, how to collect taxes. So the bottom line is they still exist.
Of course they do.
So the bottom line is, yes, I have a lot of clients that I've just talked to on the phone. But with Zoom, we can see each other. And the Zoom makes a big difference, being able to see somebody. And then with the Zoom, you can share a screen, show things to each other. And with the existing clients that I've had for many years, I took a little informal survey and I said, so how do you like it? And what most of the clients said is, Steve, they really like the remote better because the time they would take driving, they can be at home. And one of the clients, I met with him about 5:00 in the afternoon, and I asked him, he laughed at me and he said, Steve, my home is an hour and a half from your office. Before, if I was leaving, I'd have to drive for an hour and a half. Now I'm going to hang up and I'm going to have dinner. I'll be finished dinner long before I would have gotten home. He never wants to come back in. He'll be a client for a lifetime. And most of the people that I've spoken to said, no, they don't want to come in. Not to mention things like traffic and parking. And in some cities, there's some political problems that people want to avoid.
And who knows? Maybe the next time we have Yoseph on, it'll be an Android. It'll be AI. We'll say, Yoseph, you look great. And it's
Thank you. Thanks.
But I bet you next time we're going to do Zoom again instead of physically coming in. And that's also the travel time, even commuting. I live in the city and my office is in the financial district. Physically, it's only 6 miles from my house to the office. But during rush hour, it would take me an hour.
Yeah, that's insane.
You know what? Now, when I work remotely, I spend that hour instead of driving, working with clients. So all of a sudden, magically, that put 2 extra hours into my day. Huge.
Well, Yoseph, be in touch. Thank you so much for coming on our show. And Practical Tax, please come back and join us again, okay?
Thanks. Happy Friday.
That's it for another edition of Practical Tax. You can find us by going on YouTube and putting in Practical Tax, or go to MoskowitzLLP.com. Until next time, for tax attorney Steve Moskowitz, I'm Chip Franklin. See you then.
You're listening to the Practical Tax Podcast with tax attorney Steve Moskowitz.